Hello, welcome everyone to my home. Tonight we're going to read chapter 16, What Happened to the Statues. As you remember, the witch delivered a lot of people and animals into statues. And I'm going to read just the end of the last chapter to kind of get you in the mood. If you remember, hi Todd, glad to have you here. If you remember, last time the two girls rode the back of Aslan as they were going to the witch's castle. He was flying through the air because he came back alive and broke the stone table down the middle. It was nearly, I'm going to just read the end of the last chapter to introduce the new one. So it was, hi Martha, good to see you. So it was nearly midday when they found themselves looking down a steep hillside at a castle. This is what we ended reading last night. A little toy castle it looked like from where they stood, which seemed to be all pointed towers. But the lion was rushing down at such a speed that it grew larger every moment. And before they had time even to ask themselves what it was, they were already on a level with it. And now it looked no longer like a toy castle, but rose frowning in front of them. No face looked over the battlements, and the gates were fast shut. And Aslan, not at all slacking his pace, rushed straight as a bullet toward it. "The witch is home," he cried. "Now, children, hold tight." Next moment, the whole world seemed to turn upside down, and the children felt if they had left their insides behind them, for the lion had gathered himself together for a greater leap than any he had yet made, and jumped, or you may call it flying rather than jumping, right over the castle wall. Wow. The two girls, breathless but unhurt, found themselves tumbling off his back in the middle of a wide stone courtyard full of statues. Chapter 16 we started, and at the end I'm going to tell you a little bit about a walk I took today and what we're doing at tea time starting today, this weekend and next weekend, and what we'll be doing during Holy Week. Chapter 16, What Happened About the Statues? "What an extraordinary place," cried Lucy. "All those stone animals and people too. It's like a museum." "Hush," said Susan. "Aslan's doing something." He was indeed. He had bounded up to the stone lion and breathed on him. Then, without waiting a moment, he whisked round, almost as if he'd been a cat chasing its tail, and breathed also on the stone dwarf, which, as you remember, was standing a few feet from the lion and with his back to it. Then he pounced on a tall stone dryad which stood beyond the door, turned rapidly aside to deal with a stone rabbit on his right, and rushed on to two centaurs. But at the moment, Lucy said, "Oh, Susan, look at the lion. I expect you've seen someone put a lighted match." Hi, Patrick, welcome. "I expect you've seen someone put a lighted match to a bit of newspaper which is propped up in a grate against an unlit fire. And for a second, nothing seems to have happened. And then you notice a tiny streak of flame creeping along the edge of the newspaper." I had that happen tonight, getting the fire lit. I was having a hard time, but I had to watch the flame go up. "And for a second, nothing seems to have happened. Then you notice a tiny streak of flame creeping along the edge of the newspaper." It was like that now. For a second after Aslan had breathed upon him, the stone lion looked just the same. Then a tiny streak of gold began to run along his white marble back, and then it spread. And then the color seemed to lick all over him as a flame licks all over a bit of paper. Then, while his hindquarters were still obviously stone, the lion shook his mane, and all the heavy stone folds rippled into living hair. Then he opened a great red mouth, warm and living, and gave a prodigious yawn. Can you imagine the size of a yawn of a lion? Oh, it makes me want to yawn, sorry. And now his hind legs had come to life. He lifted one of them and scratched himself. That must have felt really good. Then, having caught sight of Aslan, he went bounding after him and frisked around him, whimpering with delight and jumping up to lick his face. Of course, the children's eyes turned to follow the lion, but the sight they saw was so wonderful that they soon forgot about him. Everywhere the statues were coming to life. The courtyard looked no longer like a museum, it looked more like a zoo. Creatures were running after Aslan and dancing round him till he was almost hidden in the crowd. Can you imagine? How fun. Instead of all that deadly white, the courtyard was now a blaze of colors. Glossy chestnuts, sides of centaurs, indigo horns of unicorns, dazzling plumage of birds, reddy brown of foxes, dogs, and satyrs, yellow stockings and crimson hoods of dwarfs, and the birch girls in silver, and the beech girls in fresh, transparent green, and the larch girls in green so bright that it was almost yellow. And instead of the deadly silence, the whole place rang with the sound of happy roarings, bayings, yelpings, barkings, squealings, cooings, neighings, stamping, shouts, hurrahs, song, and of course, laughter. Oh, said Susan in a different tone, look, I wonder, I mean, is it safe? Lucy looked and saw that Aslan had just breathed on the feet of the stone giant. It's all right, shouted Aslan joyously. Once the feet are put right, all the rest of him will follow. Sounds like us, doesn't it? That isn't exactly what I meant. Oh, sorry. That isn't exactly what I meant, whispered Susan to Lucy. But it was too late to do anything about it now, even if Aslan would have listened to her. The change was already creeping up the giant's leg. Now he was moving his feet. Ooh. A moment later, he lifted his club off his shoulder and rubbed his eyes and said, Bless me, I must have been asleep. Now, where's that dratted little witch that was running about on the ground? Somewhere just by my feet it was. But when everyone had shouted up to him to explain what really happened, and when the giant had put his hand to his ear and got them to repeat it all again, so that at last he understood, then he bowed down till his head was no further off the top of a haystack and touched his cap repeatedly to Aslan, beaming all over his honest, ugly face. Now, giants of any sort are now so rare in England, and so few giants are good-tempered that 10 to 1 you've never seen a giant with his face as is beaming. It's a sight well worth looking at. Now for the inside of the house, said Aslan. Look alive, everyone, upstairs and downstairs and in my lady's chamber. Leave no corner unsearched. You never know where some prisoner may be concealed. And into the interior they all rushed, and for several minutes the whole of that dark, horrible, fusty old castle echoed with the opening of windows and with everyone's voices crying out at once. Sounds a little bit like the people coming out on the balconies in Italy and playing music and shouting at each other. Don't forget the dungeons, Aslan said. Give us a hand with this door. Here's another little winding stair. Oh, I say, here's a poor kangaroo. Call Aslan. Whew, how it smells in here. Look out for the trapdoors. Up here. There are whole lot more on the landing. But the best of all was when Lucy came rushing upstairs shouting out, Aslan, Aslan, I found Mr. Tumnus. Oh, do come quick. A moment later, Lucy and the little fawn were holding each other by both hands and dancing round and round for joy. The little chap was none the worse for having been a statue, and was of course very interested in all that she had to tell him. But at last the ransacking of the witch's fortress was ended. The whole castle stood empty, with every door and window open, and the light in the sweet spring air flooding into all the dark and evil places which needed them so badly. Imagine that stink. The whole crowd of liberated statues surged back into the courtyard. And it was then that someone, Tumnus I think, first said, "But how are we going to get out? For Aslan got in by a jump and the gates are still locked." "That'll be all right," said Aslan. Then rising on his hind legs, he bawled up to the giant. "Hi, you up there!" He roared, "What is your name?" "Giant Rumblebuffin, if it please your honor," said the giant, once more touching his cap. "Well then, Giant Rufflebuffin," said Aslan, "just let us out of this, will you?" "Certainly, your honor, it will be a pleasure," said Giant Rumblebuffin. "Stand well away from the gates, all you little ones." Then he strode up to the gate himself, and bang, bang, bang went his huge club. Hey, Gary. The gates creaked at the first blow, cracked at the second, and shivered at the third. Then he tackled the towers on each side of them, and after a few minutes of crashing, thudding, both the towers and a good bit of wall on each side went thundering down in a mass of hopeless rubble. And when the dust cleared, it was odd, standing in that dry, grim, stony yard, to see through the gap all the grass and waving trees and sparkling streams of the forest and the blue hills beyond that, and beyond them the sky. "Blowed if I ain't all in a muck sweat," said the giant, puffing like the largest railway engine. "Comes of being out of condition. I suppose neither of you young ladies has such a thing as a pocket handkerchief about you." "Yes, I have," said Lucy, standing up on tiptoes and holding her handkerchief up as far as she could reach. "Thank you, missy," said Giant Rumblebuffin, stooping down. Next moment, Lucy got rather a fright, for she found herself caught up in mid-air between the giant's finger and his thumb. Oh my goodness. But just as she was getting near his face, he suddenly started and then put her gently back on the ground, muttering, "Bless me, I picked up the little girl instead." "I beg your pardon, missy. I thought you was the handkerchief." No, said Lucy, laughing. "Here it is." This time he managed to get it, but it was only about the same size to him as a saccharin tablet, which would be like an aspirin tablet or smaller, would be to you. So that when she saw him solemnly rubbing it to and fro across his great red face, she said, "I'm afraid it's not much use to you, Mr. Rumblemuffin." "Not at all. Not at all," said the giant politely. "Never met a nicer handkerchief. So fine, so handy, so I don't know how to describe it." Not at all, said the giant politely. "Never met a nicer handkerchief. So fine, so handy, so I don't know how to describe it." "What a nice giant he is," said Lucy to Mr. Tumnus. "Oh yes," replied the fawn. "All the Buffins always were. One of the most respected of all the giant families in Narnia. The Buffin family is respected." Got it? "Not very clever, perhaps. I never knew a giant that was, but an old family, with respectable traditions, you know. If he had been the other sort, she'd never had turned him into stone." At this point, Aslan clapped his paws together and called for silence. "Silence! Silence! Our day's work is not yet over." he said, and if the witch is to be finally defeated before bedtime, we must find the battle at once. And join in, I hope, sir, added the largest of the centaurs. Of course, said Aslan, and now those who can't keep up, that is, children, dwarfs, and small animals, must ride on the backs of those who can. That is, lions, centaurs, unicorns, horses, giants, and eagles. Those who are good with their noses must come out in front with us lions to smell out where the battle is. Look lively and sort yourselves. With a great deal of bustle and cheering they did. The most pleased of the lot was the other lion, who kept running about everywhere, pretending to be very busy, but really in order to say to everyone he met, "Did you hear what he said? Us lions?" It's kind of what this quarantine means to us. We kind of ask the question, are we us lions? And we're not running around being busy anymore. Thank you, Gary and Shane, for tuning in. We'll continue now. And with a great deal of bustle and cheering, they did sort themselves and look lively. The most pleased of the lot was the other lion, who kept, running about everywhere, pretending to be very busy, but really in order to say everyone he met, "Did you hear what he said? Us lions," underlining that. That means him and me, us lions. That's what I like about Aslan. No side, no standoffishness, just us lions. That meant him and me. At least he went on saying this till Aslan had loaded him up with 3 dwarfs, 1 dryad, 2 rabbits, and a hedgehog. That steadied him a bit and calmed him down. When all were ready, it was a big sheepdog who actually helped Aslan most in getting them sorted into their proper order. They set out through the gap in the castle wall. At first the lions and dogs went nosing about in all directions. But then, suddenly, one great hound picked up the scent and gave a bay. There was no time lost after that. Soon all the dogs and lions and wolves and other hunting animals were going at full speed with their noses to the ground. And all the others streaked out for about a half a mile behind them, were following as fast as they could. The noise was like an English fox hunt, only better, because every now and then, with the music of the hounds, was mixed the roar of the other lion, and sometimes the far deeper and more awful roar of Aslan himself. Roar! Faster and faster they went as the scent became easier and easier to follow. And then, just as they came to the last curve in a narrow, winding valley, Lucy heard above all these noises another noise, a different one, which gave her a queer feeling inside. It was a noise of shouts and shrieks and of clashing metal against metal. Then they came out of the narrow alley, and at once she saw the reason. There stood Peter and Edmund and all the rest of Aslan's army, fighting desperately against the crowd of horrible creatures whom she had seen last night. And only now in the daylight they looked even stranger and more evil and more deformed. There also seemed to be far more of them. Peter's army, which had their backs to her, looked terribly few. And there were statues dotted all over the battlefield. So apparently the witch had been using her wand, but she did not seem to be using it now. She was fighting with her stone knife. It was Peter she was fighting, both of them going at it so hard that Lucy could hardly make out what was happening. She only saw a stone knife and Peter's sword flashing so quickly that they looked like 3 knives and 3 swords. Have you ever seen whirling dervishes? That sounds like what they are. That pair were in the center, and on each side the line stretched out. Horrible things were happening wherever she looked. "Off my back, children," shouted Aslan, and they both tumbled off. Then, with a great roar that shook all Narnia, from the western lamppost to the shore of the eastern sea, the great beast flung himself upon the White Witch. Lucy saw her face lifted toward him for 1 second with an expression of terror and amazement. The lion and the witch had rolled over together, but the witch was underneath, and at the same moment all warlike creatures whom Aslan had led from the witch's house rushed madly on the enemy lines. Dwarfs with their battle axes, dogs with their teeth, the giant with his club, and his feet also crushed dozens of the foe. Unicorns with their horns, centaurs with swords and hooves. And Peter's tired army cheered, and the newcomers roared, and the enemy squealed and gibbered till the wood re-echoed with the din of that onset. Hey Ken, good to see you. Thank you all for listening. I can't wait to read tomorrow's chapter. It's the hunting of the white stag. So this is a great battle. I wanted to share with you at the ending a couple of things and invite you to tea time for the next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, this week and next, Palm Sunday and the beginning of Holy Week. By the way, my daughter Abigail's church is doing a really cool thing. You can send in a video of about 2 seconds they encourage you to find anything green in your house, any plant, and wave it, and they'll put it online and have it as part of the processional of the palms on Sunday. Anyway, we have to do what we have to do. I've decided for this next 3 days, and for the next 3 days on the other side, to dedicate it to the painting that you see above. It's called Shell and Stone by a man named William Swett Charnock, and it's a very interesting painting, and it has to do with reason, beauty, and poetry. This painting is called Shell and Stone, and it's from Wordsworth writing. The shell represents beauty, and the stone represents knowledge. And I will go over details of it as we go through the weekend and next weekend. And in the middle, for those of you who didn't know, you can see my videos on YouTube. It's Glenfeather Hall, youtube.com. Today I started the tea by talking about my newest, it's not new, I've been here for several years, but artist in residency job here at Trinity Episcopal Church in Upperville, Virginia. And at the end of these broadcasts, no matter how long they last or somewhere in between, I'm going to revive something that we've done a lot with the Washington Arts Group, doing a symposium, and we're going to do a symposium on Wordsworth and this painting and things involving that by doing it online. And any of you that would like to do it, we look forward to including you. Tomorrow, I will read this in the evening, but tomorrow's tea time will go into more detail of this painting. Next week, I'm planning to and hope to be able to show you some of the beauty of the campus across the street. And at last, an invitation to come out and visit it sometime. Even though it's locked right now, the outdoor chapel and gardens are open. And there's a really wonderful place that you can get carry-out dinner down the street called Hunter's Head Tavern. It's fantastic. Before I close, I just want to go back to the shell and stone theme, as I did last night. Yesterday, I went into a field and found these flowers, and I've been asking God to guide me about the next part of the future of the Washington Arts Group, and also just the future of what I can do here at Trinity. I've done 2 art and faith conferences, including the debut of a wonderful book I'd recommend all of you to get called The Gardens of Bunny Mellon. And it's quite wonderful, and I'll show you a copy of it tomorrow. But these dried grasses were out in a field, even with the green grass. And in finishing this reading tonight, I keep thinking about it. To me, yesterday, I was so overwhelmed. My daughter Rachel's in New York City and totally overwhelmed by the crisis. yesterday, she mentioned that there were 4 refrigerated trucks that served as morgues to take the bodies. One of them parked across the street from her house, her apartment. So it's really quite grim, and I really encourage you all to pray for New York City and everywhere else. We're just beginning all over the country to catch up with this crisis. The story tonight reminds me of the statues coming out of stone and the description of the lion with the gold and the mane, the gold dripping down, and then his fur growing. And this white flower, this is a beautiful Japanese vase that Steve and Missy Temi, my friends, gave me. And it's from Japan, and it reminds me of this story. The white flower also reminds me of the desert lily, which I'll tell you again tomorrow about it, but it's there's a film that I was in called Many Beautiful Things. Some of you have seen it, probably a lot of you have seen it, but it's a wonderful story about a woman who, on her own with other 2 women, went to Algiers to share the love of Jesus and to help women who'd been tossed out of the harems and had too many children and were destitute. So remember all those who are suffering tonight. And the thing that finally convinced me, I'm trying to learn now from poetry and writing as well as nature, which is the symbol of these. There's the shell, there's another shell here. There's another stone pillar, and there's a glass base in the top with shells inside and water, a moth, and a salamander, and then more stone. And then the back looks like dirt. It's like a mud wall in an old castle. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. But I just wanted you to see this amazing rock that started my whole thinking about shell and stone. This rock looks like one main current and then branches coming off. If you look, what I thought it was, when you look, there are 2 lines here, there are 3 over on the other side, and they come together down here and up here, and then we all flow together this way. And I was just thinking of it, all of my friends who I love and people that I'm learning to love and to discover, that all of us are united in God's presence in our life and our fellowship with one another, even though we're isolated. And I want to show you what this turns out to be, the end of this rock. It's the Holy Trinity. That's where all the lines end up. That's how we are one. The 1 and 3, we are all one in Him. Today, this chapter tonight especially fits with what I discovered today. One of our parishioners lives on a house on a hill, and I've taken walks by there several times. It's the position of the house is really interesting. The entrance is on the north, and the back is to the south, and then the 2 wings are east and west. So they have a 360-degree view of the valley. As I was walking by there today, I noticed that there was high winds, and I noticed the grass. And I'm not sure what the exact scripture is, but the gist of it is the blades of the grass blow in the wind, the trees clap their hands. And I got this distinct sense of celebration and joy in creation, just watching the grass blades wave as they went across the fields. Our church, the altar faces the east. Most Episcopal churches in the south face the south. The entrance faced the south, and the altar was in the north. But this one was changed, and the sun comes up in the east. And the reason I thought of this today and the waving grass was my bedroom window also faces east, and so the rising sun comes through that window. And there's a painting on the other end of the room. It's an old painting of 2 men meeting on a bridge with cliffs on each side. And I was just thinking of Lewis's images, like even tonight in the castle with the 2 towers and all of that. And for some reason, the light in the morning, early in the morning, casts itself on the bridge. And there are people on the bridge, and it reminded me of my friends. So every morning I'm reminded of my friends with the light comes up from the east. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Again, this is all posted on YouTube under Glimfeather Hall. And tomorrow I will begin to go into depths on this painting and hoping really that it will work into the symposia that I can have here at the church, but also online with all of you. And it would be really great, and I would love to get any responses you might have. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you. The tea times are at 3, and the fireside talks readings are at 7. And you can get them anytime on YouTube under Glimfeather Hall. Glym Feather. It's spelled differently than Lewis's. Glym Feather. And I'll tell you where that name came tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and hold your family close to you and those that you love. And please be in touch with people you haven't seen. It's really important, even more important right now. Thank you all for tuning. God bless.